Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. A new record for toxic drug deaths in BC.
We need to be talking about prevention.
And the families speaking out about what needs to change. Plus, frustration and disappointment over the rescheduling of Drake's first of 2 Vancouver shows.
My kids are heartbroken, I'm heartbroken.
The scramble to get rid of tickets for out-of-towners. And taking back control.
For me, it's been several years since I've been here because it can get too busy.
How First Nations in BC are pushing for more access in their traditional territories.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. A lot of frustration spilling into today after last night's last-minute cancellation of the Drake concert in Vancouver. Many people are still trying to get a refund as they won't be able to go to that rescheduled show tomorrow. Now, his second show was scheduled for tonight, and as of right now, it is still a go. Our Joel Ballard is live at Rogers Arena right now. Joel, any indication that we could be seeing another delay, or are things, all go ahead?
Anita, as far as we can tell right now, things look like they will be going ahead. It looks like Drake will be performing. I just saw they're still selling tickets on the side here. People are still lined up. They're still obviously selling merchandise here. Now, the doors are supposed to open at 6, and it looks like we're having a bit of movement up there. I've been in and out of the area throughout the day, and there's a lot of excitement here, but Anita, there's also a mix of disappointment after everything that's happened.
And I know when that hotline blink.
He's one of hip-hop's biggest stars, but last night, fans in Vancouver were left disappointed, like this family, traveling all the way from northern Saskatchewan.
They wanted to go to Drake. I made it happen. I got them here. We were at the door, waiting to go in.
Less than an hour before the show, it was canceled.
My kids are heartbroken. I'm heartbroken.
Rogers Arena nixed the show due to an issue with a newly installed video board. That show has now been rescheduled for tomorrow. But that doesn't work for everyone, especially those from out of town.
I couldn't reschedule my flight or the rooms for another night.
Outside the box office at Rogers Arena, there's been a steady line for much of the day.
I'm pretty mad. We came like 9 hours away.
From Prince George, or Vanderhoof, BC.
Yeah, Vanderhoof, BC. So we're just trying to see if we can get our tickets changed tonight. If not, we gotta head back home.
If it's something as simple as a Jumbotron, a lot of people would have been more than happy just to hear him sing.
Some fans say they're in the process of getting a full refund from Ticketmaster, and experts predict tomorrow's show won't be sold out.
There will be an abundance of tickets because a lot of people cannot come back to go to the Wednesday show.
And he thinks there could be some sweet deals.
You want really good seats? They'll definitely be getting them a lot cheaper than when they initially went on sale.
Back at Rogers Arena, fans seeing the show tonight have been lining up all day. Some since 7 a.m.
Drizzy, man, what do you mean? We got It's the boy. The boy. We got to be here, show out for the homie.
God's plan. God's plan.
Confident Drake will take the stage.
Honestly, man, his lyrics just hit different for me. Like, I don't know why. I just feel it just allows me into his life, man. It's crazy, man. It's an experience for me.
Anita, yesterday when Rogers Arena put out its statement about the technical difficulties, it said more information would follow. CBC News reached out today, and we were told that there is no further comment, and so that means we're still at a point where we don't really know more about the technical difficulties aside from some sort of unforeseen circumstance with the video board. Anita?
Well, and it does look like things are moving a little bit behind you there, Joel, so maybe the doors have opened, but we will keep you there for a little bit longer just in case anything changes. Joel Ballard reporting live at Rogers Arena tonight. Thank you. After weeks of evacuations, choking smoke and destruction, lightning has now sparked dozens of new wildfires across the province. That's despite rain giving some relief for fire crews. Dan Burritt joins us live with more on this. Dan, certainly we need more rain, but the new fires are a challenge.
We have 47 new blazes recorded in the past day, Anita, after thunderstorms moved through. They were sparked on Vancouver Island and near Kamloops and Prince George. At least 400 fires are now burning across the province. and many areas are still very dry. The hope is for more rain.
It's a day of consolidation, and what that means is that we do bring our crews into areas that are closer to the high-value communities, working on lines that are well anchored in, that allow for safe egress out of these areas if fire behavior was to pick up significantly.
Crews battling the Bush Creek fire in the Shuswap region are hoping for rain tonight. Officials say that fire's behavior has picked up, but there has been no major growth on it. That fire damaged or destroyed nearly 170 properties just over a week ago. Officials are now notifying affected residents. Crews are also busy restoring power in that area. Almost 30 kilometers of power lines and more than 400 poles have to be replaced. And Hydro expects that number will go up. 3,000 people at last check are still without power. In the Okanagan, some evacuation orders were rescinded, but officials say properties north of Highway 97 in the West Bank First Nation have been added to an existing evacuation order, and Highway 97 itself has been closed since yesterday, just north of Summerland, after rock and debris tumbled down. Crews have been checking to see if it's safe to reopen. Still no word on that. Drivers are advised to take Highway 33 through Osoyoos or Highway 5A through Princeton. And another highway closure to tell you about tonight. Highway 1 between Boston Bar and Lytton in the Fraser Canyon was reopened for a time after it was shut down by the Kokipi fire. But BC's Transportation Ministry now says it will be shut down from Hope to Lytton from 8:30 tonight to 6 a.m. tomorrow. They say there's a risk that debris could hit the road because of rain. Anita.
Dan Burrett live tonight. Thank you. BC has set a new record for drug overdose deaths for the first 7 months of this year. 198 people died from toxic drugs in July, according to data released by the BC Coroner Service. Mira Baines is looking at the disheartening numbers.
It's a bleak picture when you look at the BC Coroner Service numbers. 1,455 for the first 7 months of this year is the most ever reported since the overdose crisis was declared in 2016. It means BC is on pace to record the most toxic drug deaths in a year ever.
And for the last 2 years, we've lost more than 6 people every single day.
Even with new ways to help prevent deaths, including a decriminalization pilot project for BC and Safe Supply, the numbers keep going up. BC's chief coroner says what's missing is a comprehensive plan for the province and wait time information for detox programs.
You know, what we have said all along throughout this crisis is that there needs to be a continuum of care for people. It can't just be safer supply. It can't just be treatment. We need a range of options for folks.
Advocates are pushing to make Safe Supply more available and in smaller communities to prevent people from using tainted drugs. Helen Jennings, a Kelowna mother, lost 2 sons to drug overdoses. Both died alone and indoors.
There's no political will to bring about a solution that would work right now, which is safer supply.
Jennings says drug dealers need to be put out of business and more treatment and prevention programs are needed.
There's not enough treatment or recovery beds in anywhere in Canada. We need to be building that. We need to be talking about prevention and awareness down to probably the age of 12 or 13-year-old kids.
The new numbers come as International Overdose Awareness Day will be marked on Thursday. It's a day to remember those who have died from overdoses and recognize the grief of family and friends. Events take place across BC. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC health officials say the first known Canadian case of the BA.286 COVID-19 virus variant has been detected in the Fraser Health region. There is no increased risk to the public at this point. The case was found in a person who has not traveled outside of the province. In a statement, the province says it hasn't seen increased severity with this strain of COVID, and the individual is not hospitalized, adding it was not unexpected for the variant to show up in BC, and they are monitoring it closely. With back to school on the horizon and the potential for another wave of flu, RSV, and COVID, similar to what we saw last fall, there is some concern in the health community.
It has like 30 plus mutations in it, similar to how different Omicron had been initially. So that's, of course, the big fear. And with that many mutations, is there going to be a lot of what we call immune escape? So where it can not be affected, if you've been vaccinated, if you've had COVID before, that's not going to protect you if the virus is too different because of mutations.
Though only a handful of cases exist, the new variant has emerged across several continents since it was first identified in late July. It likely stemmed from BA2, an Omicron descendant that helped spark a wave of infections in the spring of 2022. Health Canada says current treatment options available are effective, and it recommends getting another dose of the vaccine whenever eligible. Well, the victim of yesterday's shooting in Mission has died. Yesterday, around 5 o'clock, Mission RCMP were called to Laminum Avenue, off Cedar Street after a report of a shooting. They took the 45-year-old victim with life-threatening gunshot wounds to the hospital where he died from his injuries early this morning. Shortly after the shooting, there were reports of a vehicle on fire about 4 kilometers away near Doyle Street and Richards Avenue. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team is now on the case, and they believe this is related to the BC gang conflict. Well, a former BC federal political candidate has been charged with trafficking of a person under the age of 18. Wyatt Scott was an independent candidate for Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon. He faces dozens of charges related to 2 separate incidents that took place in or near Chilliwack. Beyond the trafficking charge, the others include firearm-related offenses, sexual assault, and unlawful confinement. Scott is expected to be in Chilliwack court this Thursday. Darius Madavi joins us now with a first look at the weather. And Darius, this rain potentially meaning good news for the drought situation?
It's definitely meaning good news for the fire situation. It might be too soon to say what it's meaning for the drought situation because we're in a really unprecedented and dangerous situation right now in terms of drought. We're now at 29 out of the 34 basins in BC at drought level 4 or 5. We saw some more places in the southern interior come up in terms of drought rating. So this is not something that we see really have seen before. It's difficult to say when exactly those drought levels will start to come down. I wouldn't even expect that this rain, even though we're getting 3 days of it, will bring drought levels down any significant amount because this is going to be a very long-term situation that we're dealing with. Now, we also did have temperatures come down, so that is helpful both in terms of fire and drought. The south is seeing temperatures around or below seasonal now, except for the Kootenays, which are still high, but are going to drop way down tomorrow. Up north, we have temperatures above seasonal for the area. Yesterday, we saw Fort Nelson, and Dease Lake break temperature records for the day, so a lot of heat up there, but coming down tomorrow, the Kootenays drop way down from 33 all the way to 16, so temperatures way down across the province. In Vancouver, we're staying around where we are now, which is close to seasonal, a bit below, so don't expect anything too exciting here, but lots of rain still to come for the south, for Vancouver, and really across the province. So nothing but good news here, except for the potential for winds, but we'll talk more about that later this hour.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, 2 weeks ago, Hello Ferries went full speed ahead after a rocky start. The new ferry service travels between downtown Vancouver and Nanaimo, offering an alternative to BC ferries. The CBC's Amar Parmar took a ride along.
Here I am outside of the Hello Nanaimo Ferry Terminal, kind of on the outskirts of downtown, probably a 20-minute walk to downtown. This is definitely a place that you're going to have to get dropped off by a car if you don't want to walk that far. Now, there's no real terminal or station here yet. It's kind of a makeshift setup they have. And you can't buy tickets here either. They can only be bought on their website. We see the 2 of them there, the Spa Els and the Staki. Only a few sailings a day, apparently more to come. Walking onto the ferry,
be right there.
Behind the seats, there's space for my luggage. I'm in the cheapest comfort section, $40 a seat compared to $20 at the BC ferries. The seats are very similar to those on an airplane, and if you're wondering, so is the washroom. There is premium seating upstairs, which includes priority boarding. I wasn't allowed to go up there once the boat was moving. This ferry rips through the water and was not bumpy at all on this smooth sailing day. It's a nice sail past Stanley Park, waiting to get off. At this point, I wish I had paid for priority boarding, as the upstairs deck gets off first. It took about 20 minutes to disembark. So, 90 minutes exactly from departure, I'm walking off in behind the Vancouver Convention Center. So, for an extra $20 from Nanaimo to downtown Vancouver, it was an hour and 15 minutes faster than the BC ferry option. Was it worth it? For me, hello.
Awesome stuff, Amber. Thanks for sharing that. All right, the lines at the ritzia sale at the Vancouver Convention Centre have been very long. It's all to get a chance to buy discounted clothing and accessories at the ritzia warehouse sale. Now, some say it's a bit crazy, but they just couldn't turn down a bargain.
Oh, it was crazy. It was crazy. Everybody was like clothes all over the floor. It was just like nuts.
It's crazy. It's chaotic. It's very overwhelming, but it's kind of fun. It's for the experience, honestly. I've seen people waiting in line for hours, but honestly, some of the deals are pretty sweet, so I see where it is. Some of them are okay, but some of them are really good, like more than half off, 70% off. I think it goes to like 90% off, so.
I went in and it was so chaotic, and I was like, I'm gonna go back upstairs.
After the break, the back-to-school essentials, pens, pencils, notebooks, and perhaps ChatGPT. We are live with an educator on how things are changing in the classroom with the prevalence of AI. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Last week, stunning images emerged from the small Northwest Territories town of Enterprise. The CBC's Juanita Taylor shows us a closer look at the town that was decimated by wildfires.
This property was the Poiriers.
Enterprise Mayor Mike St. Amour knows where everybody lives in his town.
This is the Flaman residence.
There were about 50 homes in this hamlet, but where houses and businesses once stood, now piles of ashes.
This is a motel that used to be there, Gateway Gas Motel. They had just finished renovating.
Mangled metal litters the ground, and trees that once surrounded the property charred. St. Amour says he personally delivered the news to 30 families.
The roughest day I had was calling the people, telling them that they'd lost everything. That was the hardest day of my life. Still hurts.
St. Amour is one of the lucky ones.
That on the corner is my residence.
His is one of about a dozen homes still standing after a ferocious wildfire tore through Enterprise on August 13th.
All we could see is a big plume of smoke. I'll give you pictures of it, and it was coming this way.
It's Grandma and Papa's house.
Natasha Cleary, a mom of 6, left as soon as the alert came on her phone. The fire destroyed her home.
It was very emotional. We both broke down and we cried, and I mean, the kids don't quite understand, but they felt it.
Across the Decho Bridge, Cleary's mother is also taking refuge after losing her home.
The reality is we lost 17 years of our life in that house and our memories.
It just moved at an unbelievable pace.
Fire officials say winds reached up to 80 kilometers that day.
That was one of the craziest days that I've ever seen or even heard of in terms of fire management in the Northwest Territories.
The situation so dangerous, fire crews had to be pulled out. St. Amour says his hamlet has been handling the aftermath on its own.
Step up. Quit talking and start doing. People's lives here.
He wants more support for his residents scattered across Alberta to help get by until they can return home.
We're going to try and get them here before the snow falls. With help or not, we're going to rebuild.
Both students and teachers are gearing up for the start of the school year around the corner, but this summer had many teachers in particular playing catch up with recent arrival of AI technology. Now, many who have been left navigating how they can design their curriculums around tools like ChatGPT. Terry Griffith is live with us tonight. She's a professor at SFU teaching innovation courses. Terry, these AI tools are clearly not going anywhere, and students are going to use them no matter what, I think it's safe to say. So where does that leave school curriculums? How have things changed for this year, in order to adapt?
This has been a very busy summer for most educators. We're having to completely rethink what it is we actually need our students to be able to do. And one of the things is how to use these tools effectively. So building in the opportunity to use the tool, but still knowing that we're teaching the student something and not just hearing from the AI.
Yeah, so how can educators be sure that the integration of this type of technology doesn't come at the expense of kids' learning?
Well, it really was a moment for us to stop, look, and listen. We had to gear up on our own to know what the tools are capable of today, and who knows what they'll be capable of tomorrow. But I can say for my students, I've described it as they now have an intern doing the work with them. So the workload is up a little bit because now it's, a couple of people doing the work. And quality, I'm going to have higher expectations of quality. But the beauty is they can actually do more work that then they can turn around and use in their work and lives. So they can just be more productive. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Well, more work for them also potentially means more work for you. Do you have the help of AI to mark all of this?
I'm not going to be using AI yet to do the marking, but I think I will be using AI to give the students even more ideas for how they could improve on the work that they've already done. So you could think about it as they do a draft, the AI does a draft, and then together we come back and think up even more ways to improve on their work.
Okay. Are there any subjects that you think that this wouldn't work in?
I don't think it's not working. I think it is very difficult for us as instructors to really get a hold of what is the new skill that the students need. So for me, it's about how do you make a good argument? How do you ask for help to get the work done? What's the workflow that's going to be valuable? And then how do you give credit when the technology is doing a fair amount of this work? It's not just a citation, but I really am going to want to know, what kinds of questions did you ask the AI that then generated the work that you turned in? So many different skills this year than in the times past.
For sure. So a lot of teachers need to be thinking about that. You, of course, teaching innovation courses probably have a little bit of a leg up, but I'm sure everyone is looking to play catch up. Terry Griffith is with SFU, Chair in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, that's 24 Sussex Drive, a place the Prime Minister hasn't called home in years. We'll go over the plans to rebuild a new residence next.
It's an airborne obstacle course. And while these arborists and tree climbers may be making it look easy, it's anything but.
You're climbing on rated anchors, and we're climbing with trees, so they're biological, there's nothing rated or known about them.
20 climbers hung out at the BC Tree Climbing Championship Saturday, and this year, 4 were women.
There's not very many females in the industry, but it's getting better, and we're working hard to promote and encourage women to be more involved.
Kaylee Alcorn has been an arborist for 5 years and says it seems more and more women are exploring the industry.
I think women bring a lot to the table.
However, she's also seen her fair share of injuries during those 5 years.
I was just at the International Tree Climbing Championship in Columbus, Ohio, and one of the climbers there, he actually had a terrible accident. He had his arm sucked into a wood chipper.
In 2016, a Vancouver city arborist lost his life. 43-year-old Jody Taylor died from injuries sustained while trimming a branch at Connaught Park, a painful reality for people working in the urban forestry industry. Despite that, 19-year-old Naomi Larson took part in her first climb on Saturday, and it's likely not her last.
And I want to get into wildfire fighting, so I figured kind of stuff to do with trees would be a good way to get into that with this experience.
She was proud to be one of only 4 women competing.
But being small also is good in some circumstances. I can fit other places and I'm lighter.
For these women, they'll stay in the industry as long as the adrenaline will pump through them as they swing from tree to tree.
It's a thrill-seeking type thing.
Zara Premji, CBC News, Chilliwack.
"93 potential unmarked graves have been found by English River First Nation in Saskatchewan. The discovery was made using ground-penetrating radar.
The discovery of the graves earlier this month was just the first step in what will continue to be a long and difficult journey. There have been 93 potential finds, but we know that's not a final number. We must continue to search these sites for more of our loved ones.
The graves were found at the former Beauval Indian Residential School. Most are believed to be children and at least 14 infants. Chief Wolverine is calling on all governments to provide resources and support, including permanent funding for Indigenous healing centers. Support is available for anyone affected by residential schools, so you can call the 24-hour National Crisis Line for access to emotional and crisis referral services. That number is 1-866-925-4419. Well, 24 Sussex Drive is the Prime Minister's official residence, but no Prime Minister has actually lived there since 2015, and it looks like no Prime Minister ever will again. As Daniel LeBlanc reports, the federal government is exploring other sites to build a brand new official residence, one that would be more modern and, above all, safe.
24 Sussex looks good from afar, but upon close inspection, it doesn't meet modern standards, especially when it comes to the security of the Prime Minister.
First of all, it's fairly easy to scale this particular fence. The distance is rather short for someone that really dashed towards a residence.
Pierre-Yves Bourdieu used to be in charge of security for Canada's official residences. Bourdieu is one of many experts who argue 24 Sussex no longer offers adequate protection against drone attacks, truck bombs, or snipers. The grounds are too narrow for comfort.
The building is sandwiched between the Ottawa River and Sussex Drive. If you consider the current situation with regards to public safety and security threat to our Prime Minister, this location is obviously not appropriate.
Since Stephen Harper left 8 years ago, the home is sat empty. Plagued by faulty electrical systems, mold, and vermin, the residence is being completely gutted. It's unlikely 24 Sussex will ever return to its traditional role.
My understanding of it is there's no way to make that site safe at a reasonable cost.
Radio-Canada has learned Ottawa is actively looking for other properties to build a brand new residence. Potential sites include an idyllic spot down the street called Rockcliffe Park, where this parking lot could accommodate a residence that is big enough and safe. Justin Trudeau and his children currently live at Rideau Cottage, on the grounds of Rideau Hall, a situation many experts deem unworthy.
I think it's embarrassing that a G7 country can't provide a safe, secure residence.
I'm biased towards history.
Even those who want to preserve 24 Sussex believe it's time for Ottawa to make up its mind.
No one wants to spend money on it because no one will make a decision because they don't want to be criticized that they're doing something for themselves.
The Conservative leader doesn't object to a new residence as long as the price is right.
It should just be a very basic, secure place where a prime minister can live safely at a reasonable cost to taxpayers.
The government promised to settle the matter of 24 Sussex by the fall, but a new minister was put in charge last month, which could delay a final decision. The hope for many is that the government will find the political courage to put an end to this saga before the next election. Daniel Leblanc, CBC News, Ottawa.
It's a shocking discovery by doctors in Australia, a live worm in a patient's brain. It happened last year, but they're only telling us about it now. Here's the reaction from the physician called in to help.
Something this large, 8 centimetres, and wriggling around, and something that had never before been seen in a human being, was certainly something we'll never forget.
The discovery was made by a neurosurgeon. The worm was in the brain of a 64-year-old woman who had been suffering from memory loss and depression. This kind of worm is usually found in pythons. The patient received treatment and went back home. Doctors say they are keeping a close eye on her. After the break, Hurricane Idalia is building strength, and the state of Florida is getting ready for a severe thunderstorm. We'll have the latest on that next.
This barn on County Road 42 and the one across the street were both hit by a tornado that tracked from Tecumseh to Lakeshore. And this is just some of the damage from that second tornado. It tracked from LaSalle to South Windsor along the Huron Church corridor.
One was an EF0 tornado in the West Windsor area, and it had about a 12-kilometer track. The other that occurred exactly at the same time was an EF1 tornado that started in Tecumseh, went into Lakeshore, again, down to the south-southeast with the leading edge of that storm. And, it was a bit more intense with that particular tornado, winds to 145 kilometers per hour.
Pictures posted on social media allowed them to plot the different locations of the damage and create 2 maps that showed the track of the tornadoes.
There were no pictures of the tornadoes, and it wasn't until that we started putting together all of the different tornado reports that we could see that they were in narrow lines coming down from the north-northwest and aligned with rotation on radar.
Sills says while tornado activity is down around the rest of the country, Windsor and Ottawa are actually seeing more than usual this year.
So you guys are kind of competing in this competition no one wants to win on the number of tornadoes right in your area.
Meanwhile, the pain still continues in Essex County from last week's rain event that dumped about 190 millimeters of rain on the area. The owners of this horse farm near Cottam had to act fast during the storm to help their horses that were standing in a foot of water.
We brought in new stall mats, and that wasn't going to work, so we decided to bring manure from the back pile and build up their stalls so they'd be standing above water.
The Meloche family is also putting on an addition to their house, and some forms had to be removed to drain the water. Damage was also done to items in the barn and the hay. They aren't sure if they will be able to harvest the hay field before it's no good. Meloche is wondering why this happened, considering they are paying a surcharge for a new drain in Kingsville.
The township has said that they're doing like a new drain, which we had some added thing to our taxes that they're going to try and, alleviate some of these issues, but nothing's happened so far.
CBC has reached out to the town of Kingsville for comment and are awaiting a response. Meanwhile, the mayor and other officials in Essex will be meeting Thursday to discuss future plans to deal with disasters like this. They are also waiting on a response from the province on any possible funding to help with the flood. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Hurricane Idalia has now been upgraded to a Category 2 storm. It's been lashing Cuba and the Cayman Islands as it moves across the Gulf of Mexico toward Florida. It is building strength, and the state is bracing for one of the most severe storms to hit the Gulf Coast in more than a century. As Sarah Levitt reports, some residents say it's a harsh reminder of a disaster that hit just a year ago.
This is expected to be a big one. The National Hurricane Center has classified this as an extremely dangerous major hurricane. Most of the state's counties are under state of emergencies, some with mandatory evacuations in place. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis urging residents in Idalia's expected path to be prepared and to leave ahead of time.
Where it's scheduled to hit along this big bend, and we've not really had a hurricane strike this area for a long time. I think you got to go back to the 1800s before you would see a path like this. And so those coastal areas there, have not necessarily been through this before.
Some areas, though, went through this a year ago. Hurricane Ian killed 161 people and caused $109 billion in damage. Some places and people are still trying to recover from that storm. People like Lisa Lavoie, who left her home in a panic as Ian hit, wading through waist-high water. Her home was destroyed.
The hardest part, I think, for us has been that it's not about what we lost personally, just the two of us or our family. It's about the massive level of destruction. My advice to anybody is, always better to be over-prepared than under-prepared.
Idalia itself is a concern, but so is the storm surge it may create. Walls of water higher than 3.5 meters could hit the coasts. So, as this hurricane heads to Florida, there's a lot of preparation and a whole lot of worry. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Washington.
Darius, we were talking earlier about the supermoon and how it's going to impact this hurricane. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So we're in a really precarious situation here because we're having both the hurricane, which typically gives drives high waves, what we call storm surge, because of just the wind acting on the water. We have the hurricane approaching Florida right now, bringing lots of rain, which is actually the biggest danger of a hurricane, causes the most deaths. We're expecting around 300 millimeters of rain in some parts of Florida, which is a full foot of water. And then we are also expecting lots of storm surge because of these really heavy winds pushing the water higher and higher. And the other part of this, like you said, the supermoon, we have a full moon and a full supermoon tomorrow night, which means that when we have a full moon with the moon on one side of the Earth and the sun on the other, that generally causes higher high tides and lower low tides. And then a supermoon, when the moon is closer to the Earth, generally brings higher tides as well, just because the moon is closer and can act more strongly on the ocean. So with that, together with the storm surge that this hurricane is expected to bring to Florida, this could mean high storm surge of anywhere from 3 to 5 meters in some parts of Florida, making this an especially dangerous situation. So it's not just the winds, the potential tornadoes, and the rain we have to look out for. With the moon currently at perigee, we have to worry about this storm surge being especially nasty this time around as well. Now, here in BC, we're not seeing rains, anything like that, but we are seeing a good dousing of moisture through much of the province. It's been coming up for the coast, as we know here, for around the last 24 hours. Now it's making its way into the southern interior. So over the next few hours and overnight, we can expect lots of moisture moving up through those parts of the province, even as far north as just west of Prince George for quite a while yet. So we have until Thursday to keep seeing that moisture, as we talked about earlier. Smoke, we're clearing out quite a bit on the coast. So fairly clear skies over the next couple days we can expect. And for temperatures tonight, temperatures tonight are going to stay fairly low at around 15 for Vancouver. And we're going to see lots of rain through the south tonight as well, carrying into tomorrow for places further east. But here on the coast, by tomorrow, we can expect most of that rain is going to clear up. For some places like Whistler and further east in the Fraser Valley, they're going to keep seeing some rain for a while yet. But in Vancouver, it's looking like it's going to be a pretty clear day. Some sun poking through the clouds, unless, again, you're further out of Metro Vancouver. Then you will still see some showers. Tomorrow, the showers return once again, and then we clear up quite a bit for a sunny weekend for a few days before the rain seems likely to return at the beginning of next week.
All right, thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Well, First Nations across BC are increasingly taking on leadership roles when it comes to conservation in their territories. But what that looks like differs from nation to nation. The CBC's Emily Vance traveled to Tofino to learn about the different ways two neighboring First Nations are working to protect the environment of Clayoquot Sound.
We're on our way to Hot Springs Cove in Maquinna Marine Provincial Park. It's north of Tofino in the northwestern edge of Clayoquot Sound. We're hoping to learn more about the changes that the Ahousaht First Nation are making within the park alongside BC Parks.
Ahousaht Adventures, pop up. I think we're gonna go inside Vargas, inside Flores up to the Springs.
Copy that, thank you, have fun.
As you travel north into the heart of Clayoquot Sound, the busy surf shops and restaurant patios of Tofino quickly fade away. Out here, the truly wild West Coast reveals itself. It's the experience that thousands of people from across the globe seek every year when they visit the west coast of Vancouver Island. The sheer number of tourists is part of why the Ahousaht First Nation has taken more control over how many get to visit parks like this one.
This land is ours, and so Hot Springs Cove is a core part of Ahousaht First Nation traditional territory. It's nice to be here with so few guests and to really enjoy the springs. For me, it's been several years since I've been here because it can get too busy.
Tyson Atleo is a leader with the Ahousaht First Nation. He's been working closely with BC Parks to ensure the interests of the nation are being taken into consideration.
So the changes that we have collaborated with BC Parks to implement include restricting the number of commercially permitted operators. So the Ahousaht First Nation commercial operators have exclusive access from sunrise to 11 a.m. every day.
Commercial tour companies can now only bring one boat per day, with a maximum of 12 guests on board. The nation runs day-to-day operations in Hot Springs Cove, though the lands remain in the hands of the provincial government. Like many First Nations across the country, after colonization, the Ahousaht were largely shut out of decisions made about their land, even though they never signed it away in a treaty.
Well, long before visitors came to this region, the hot springs were, of course, a cultural site for my First Nation. And so our people have visited here for time immemorial, for as long as we know, enjoying the springs. And then as time went on, it went relatively unmanaged for a period of time, and many agree that the springs became overcrowded.
You can see how busy it was earlier, and we were like almost waiting to get a spot, so now it's really nice.
And so you'd have days here where you'd have lineups to enjoy the springs, and that's just not really what this place represents.
You took a dip today in the springs?
Yeah.
How was that?
It was magical. It had been some time since I've done it. It was rejuvenating, it was inspiring. We hope that when people come to visit here, they understand that there are precious places like this around the world that really deserve our care and attention and deserve our protection and careful management.
Restricting the number of people at Hot Springs Cove isn't just to create a better recreational experience. This is a wild place, and the crowds were starting to take a toll. These restrictions are new as of this summer, put in place by Ahousaht and BC Parks, and they are still open to change.
How busy was Hot Springs Cove prior to those changes?
It's hard to imagine, but we were seeing upwards of 30 to 32,000 visitors annually. There were days where there were over 300 people arriving at the park, sometimes 75, 80 people waiting to get into the pools at once. And you might have seen the pools, they're quite small. Some people were bathing with soaps, and you have enough of that, and all of a sudden you're starting to see the loss of certain species. And I only have a team, there's myself and 2 other rangers out here, so we are spread thin. Having a How's It Guardian team is really, I can't say enough about how happy I am that there are additional eyes and ears on the water and in the park. And that was one of the big priorities after COVID, was that BC Parks and How's It started to develop a visitor use management strategy. So these are interim permit conditions that will be in effect until February of 2024, at which point we're hoping that the visitor use management strategy will have a little bit more rigor for us to put in place some more maybe permanent permit conditions for these operators. Government takes time sometimes to do things, and this is a huge industry. There's a lot of money involved in hot springs tourism. You have to make the right decisions for everybody.
Tourism is big business in Tofino. Those 30,000 visitors that came to the Springs each year represented real money in the hands of local companies. And the commercial access changes at Hot Springs Cove now mean a lot less revenue for those businesses. I reached out to 5 different companies who offered tours to the Springs. Most of them didn't want to comment, but one did agree to speak with me about how the changes are impacting them.
It's a pretty big reduction, these temporary access limits. So what's different for you?
Our business would have done approximately 1/3 of our business going up to Hot Springs. And today it's dramatically less than that, about half of what we used to be able to generate. So the opportunity for employees who are seasonal has been reduced a bit. And then our potential to generate income has been reduced a little bit as well. I'm really happy and excited and glad to see the How's It Nation working in the management of the park, being unceded territories. We're dealing with reconciliation, we're dealing with just a new strategy and management. So I imagine they're starting in slowly and then seeing where they can go, rather than just have a free-for-all, which was maybe more how it was business model beforehand.
These children are going to be our future drivers for Ahou's adventures.
In order to take visitors to the Springs this summer, the How's It also launched their own tourism company. Woo! It's the first venture of its kind for the nation. They are now taking part in Tofino's booming tourism economy.
In terms of tourism in Tofino, where do you see Indigenous-led tourism? What kind of role do you see?
I think it's really important and really vital. The nations on the coast are a little bit slow to the show to start grasping on to these tourists and trying to share where they are. Like you're in a house at Hahufli right now, So I see this going in a really, really good direction, considering a lot of awareness just all around the world. Like it's not just in Canada, it's not just on Vancouver Island, it's, we're still here even after the attempt of assimilation. So it's important to come into these industries and leave our stamp there.
The How's It aren't the only First Nation at work protecting the lands and waters here in Clayoquot Sound. The Taloquiat First Nation consider all of the land within their traditional territory to fall within 4 tribal parks. That includes Wanajus Hilfuas, as it's known in New Channel, or Mears Island. It was declared a tribal park in 1984 as part of old-growth logging protests known as the War in the Woods. We're headed out with 2 tribal park guardians to find out more about what their work is all about. The Taloquiat Tribal Park Guardians monitor the parks, doing everything from beach cleanups to river restoration to trail building. They are out on the lands and waters, an active and ongoing presence for the nation.
I've wanted to be a park ranger since I was 12. I've always wanted to protect the land. I've always felt close to nature. And when Guardians became a thing, that was more in line and further with my dream. And the role of a guardian is that of a park ranger and more. Part of asserting that you own sovereignty of the land, you have to go out on the land. It's the most important thing nations can do, in that we have to show a presence on the territory.
Yeah, that's also why they built the boardwalk, to show we still own this land and still use it. So they built this boardwalk all the ways along.
How important is it to you as like a younger Indigenous person to move things forward in that way, in terms of asserting sovereignty and showing that you're here?
It feels great. I feel like I'm really making a difference around here and helping out everybody. trying to help out the nation and everyone else that comes to visit.
Declaring a section of land as a tribal park doesn't mean that everything within its boundaries is suddenly protected. The Taloquiat have declared 4 tribal parks in their territory. They overlap with other boundaries, including 3 provincial parks, as well as Pacific Rim National Park Reserve. Some of the land is still open to logging and mining, but the tribal parks help the Taloquiat assert their presence and influence how this land is used now and in the future.
Can you tell us about how the Taloquiat Tribal Parks came to be?
It was born in 1984 from our declaration from our elders for the Mears Island Aboriginal title court case as a way of articulating what Aboriginal title lands are. Taloquiat prepared an Aboriginal title case to stop the logging on Mears Island, and in court it wasn't a question of how to log, when, or where to log. It was who has the right to issue a tree farm permit. And ever since then, we've been negotiating how we can merge or coexist our Aboriginal title with Canadian title. Ultimately, on the 30th anniversary of Mears Island Aboriginal Title Court case on the 2014, we declared our whole territory as a tribal park as a means of sharing and articulating our management of it. We've evolved our tribal parks to articulate our vision for sharing our homeland, our vision for what needs to transform from tree farms to protected areas to protect our culture. It also describes that guardians would monitor the implementation of our tribal park vision.
How different is that vision that Taloquiat have for the land versus the Western vision for the land here?
Good question. So the footprint that's from the provincial government shows that there's tree farms everywhere, which leads to deforestation and broken rivers, impacted fisheries and drinking water. Our vision clearly maps out which rivers need to be restored and salmon recovery programs in place. Our goal isn't sustainability, our goal is abundance.
A new wave of Indigenous-led conservation is on the horizon. First Nations around BC are declaring parts of their territories as something called an IPCA, an Indigenous Protected and Conserved Area. These lands and waters are cared for by a First Nation under their own laws. Each IPCA is unique. Terry Dorward is from Taloquiat. He helped establish their Tribal Park Guardian program. Now he works with other First Nations to create conservation areas of their own.
What is an Indigenous Protected and Conserved Area?
It's a new way of looking at land resource relationships that have become unbalanced because of industrialization. We've had industry come into our territories and completely destroy areas, and who's left standing is the Indigenous people to clean it up. What Indigenous people are coming up with is how do we as Indigenous people not only ensure the well-being of our people, but also the land. As Indigenous people, we've been separated, we've been dislocated, we've been marginalized, we've been dislocated from our own territories. That time is over. The time for reclaiming and revitalizing our roles and responsibilities are now for not only our Indigenous nations, but for solving, this world crisis that we're all part of.
Whether you see it as decolonization or reconciliation, it's a slow process, and it takes hard work. These examples are from the Ahousaht and Taloquiat First Nations on Vancouver Island, but similar efforts are happening all across the country. Here in BC, the government wants 30% of the land protected by 2030, and they are looking to Indigenous protected and conserved areas as part of that. As conversations about land rights and title continue, these parks have a role to play when it comes to reconciliation.
Get ready for the puck to drop for women's professional hockey next year. We're introducing you to the new league coming up.
This used to be Beaver Creek. Right now, the creek bed is dry and muddy in some sections. There's a small pool of water where flies are feeding on rotting fish.
It's a natural part of this creek that it would dry up, but just maybe not for this long or not this early.
Beaver Creek normally drains into the Old Man River, which fills the Old Man Reservoir. Right now, the reservoir is less than half full. A number of reservoirs across southern Alberta are running low. Near Stavely, an hour south of Calgary, the Pine Coulee Reservoir is less than a third full. People who rely on the water for drinking and farm irrigation have been told to cut back. The nearby towns of Granham and Claresholm have reduced non-essential water use. The Bullducks run a farm and beef cow operation. Some of their farmland is irrigated, but their water supply has been turned off.
This is an exceptionally dry year.
They had to get a permit for some extra water for their 600 cows. Irrigated crops, including this alfalfa field, won't see another drop.
The agriculture industry is reliant on that irrigation, through dry periods. So it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, this is going to go down as one of the worst. The water sources, that's the problem. We've got springs going dry.
Look at that. That's nice horse hay.
Back at Heidi Eigel's, where she breeds rare Canadian horses, she says the way water is managed needs to be looked at.
I think we can do way more to help this creek. Maybe look at how we're using the water upstream. Look at licenses, water licenses.
It's bound to be a difficult conversation as demand increases for a dwindling resource. Brian Labby, CBC News near Pincher Creek, Alberta.
Hey everyone, my name is Grace, and today on Dirt Cheap we are talking about how to save your tomato seeds. Step one is you're going to harvest your tomato from your tomato plant. Split it open to get the seeds out, and using a strainer, just squeeze the tomato to get all your seeds out. And what you want to do is you want to get rid of all that jelly. Come over to the hose. Using a strong stream, you just want to spray off the jelly. It's important to remove that jelly so that your seed can dry properly. So once you've got it cleaned up, you're just gonna dump it out onto a paper towel and let it dry. Spread it out. To get your seeds off your paper towel, you just wanna lightly scrape them off, and then you can just collect them into your paper envelope. The benefit of having your seeds in paper is that will absorb any extra moisture rather than keeping it in plastic. And now you have tomato seeds for next year.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. On September 16th, join CBC Vancouver at the second annual Come Toward the Fire, a free outdoor festival celebrating Indigenous community, culture, and creativity. Visit cometowardthefire.com. And September is Literacy Month. Have fun and support the cause by joining CBC Vancouver's Dan Burrett at Dakota's Team Trivia Challenge on September 27th. For tickets, register at dakota.ca.
Get ready to watch professional women's hockey early next year. Today, the newly formed PWHL has announced the first 6 teams. They'll be located in Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, New York, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Boston.
Well, as of September 10th, we'll have 18 players that will be assigned to the 6 teams, 3 per team. And then following that, every other player will enter the draft. When the draft occurs on September 18th, we'll go through 15 rounds of a draft. So at that point, all 6 teams will have 18 players on their roster. For all players that don't get drafted on the 18th, they ultimately will become free agents.
The season is expected to start in January. The teams will play 24 regular season games. The league starts in November the following year with 32 regular season games. The games may be in other cities than the 6 home locations listed below. Hopefully a couple here in Vancouver would love to catch a game. All right, that is it for CBC Vancouver News at 6. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you tomorrow.